Hey guys, I'm going to be reading to you all our first 9 weeks, one book, one school selection. For 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, we are going to be reading Esperanza Rising. And the reason that we selected this book is because September the 15th to October the 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month. So we want to spend some time focusing on a culture that in the past we have regrettably not focused on very much, and we have many students in our school that represent this culture. So we want to spend a little bit of time focusing on that. Lots of people don't realize how many problems the Hispanic Americans have had in the United States. We know about segregation with the African Americans and the terrible things that they went through, but we don't realize or we don't focus on it enough is that Hispanic Americans also suffered that same fate, more in the western area than in our own local area. But there was segregation of schools and water fountains and movie theaters for Hispanic Americans, just as there was for African Americans. They were often mistreated, even sometimes killed due to their race. So we don't really focus on that as much as we should, and they don't really get the recognition that they should. So we have decided for this first 9 weeks we are going to read a book, Esperanza Rising, that focuses on Hispanic culture and Hispanic heritage. There are actually many famous Hispanic Americans that some of them you guys may know. As far as sports players, if we have sports fans out there, we have Lionel Messi, Roberto Clemente, who's a famous baseball player, Alex Rodriguez, Sammy Sosa, Oscar De La Hoya, are all famous Hispanic Americans. We also have Jennifer Lopez, Shakira, Cesar Chavez, Gloria Estefan, Sonia Sotomayor, who is a famous judge, George Lopez, Pitbull, the rapper, Frida Kahlo, Pablo Picasso. There are many famous Hispanic Americans who have left their mark on history in America. So we need to take some time and focus on those people. Okay, so for our book, Esperanza, her name means hope. So you're going to, as we read through this book and read through her struggles, you're going to understand why that's important, that her name means hope. The blurb, the part on the back of the book, tells us, riches to rags. Esperanza believed her family would be wonderful forever. She would always live on her family's ranch in Mexico. She would always have fancy dresses and a beautiful home filled with servants. Papa and Abuelita would always be with her. But a sudden tragedy shatters her world and forces Esperanza and Mama to flee to California, where they settle in a camp for Mexican farm workers. Esperanza isn't ready for the hard labor, financial struggles brought on by the Great Depression, and lack of acceptance she now faces. When Mama gets sick and a strike for better working conditions threatens to uproot their new life, Esperanza must find a way to rise above her difficult circumstances, because Mama's life and her own depend on it. So as we read through this book, I'm going to try to stop and talk a little bit about some of the things that we read about. I'm only going to try to read for about 10 minutes each day so that it's not overwhelming to you. But I will talk a little bit, and I'll also, at the end of each day, give you a little challenge of something that you can do to help you become more involved in the story. Okay. Also, I'm going to apologize in advance for my Spanish-speaking students. I will probably butcher some of these Hispanic words, but I've looked them up and I'm trying my best to make sure that I pronounce them as close to accurate as possible. Okay, So let's start Esperanza Rising. It's by Pam Munoz Ryan. She is Hispanic American herself. She's actually from the San Joaquin Valley. And she has written several books with Hispanic characters. So if you like this one, you might want to check out some of her other books. All right. Aguascalientes, Mexico, 1924. Our land is alive, Esperanza, said Papa, taking her small hand as they walked through the gentle slopes of the vineyard. A vineyard is a place where they grow grapes. Leafy green vines draped the arbors, and the grapes were ready to drop. Esperanza was 6 years old and loved to walk with her papa through the winding rows, gazing up at him and watching his eyes dance with the love for the land. The whole valley breathes and lives, he said, sweeping his arm toward the distant mountains that guarded them. It gives us the grapes, and then they welcome us. He gently touched a wild tendril that reached into the row, as if it had been waiting to shake his hand. He picked up a handful of earth and studied it. Did you know that when you lie down on the ground, you can feel it breathe? That you can feel its heart beating? Papa, I want to feel it, she said. Come. They walked to the end of the row, where the incline of the land formed a grassy swell. Papa lay down on his stomach and looked up at her, patting the ground next to him. Esperanza smoothed her dress and knelt down. Then, like a caterpillar, she slowly inched flat next to him, their faces looking at each other. The warm sun pressed on one of Esperanza's cheeks and the warm earth on the other. She giggled. Shh, he said. You can only feel the earth's heartbeat when you are still and quiet. She swallowed her laughter and after a moment said, I can't hear it, Poppy. Aguante tantito y la fruta caerá into mano, he said, which means, wait a little while and the fruit will fall into your hand. You must be patient, Esperanza. So that is a proverb, and a proverb is basically something that people say that gives you a little bit of advice, or it tells you something that you can do. There's actually proverbs in all cultures that were passed down. So think a minute, what do you think he might mean when he says, wait a little while and the fruit will fall into your hand? What do you think that might mean? To me, I think that he is saying, just like when you're waiting for fruit to ripen on the tree, you can't just reach up and grab it and yank it off. You have to wait for it to be fully ripe, and then after you've been patient for a while and you've waited, then you will get the prize, the fruit. So he's telling Esperanza, you can't rush it. You have to lay there and be still, and then you will be able to hear the earth's heartbeat. And what do you think that means, hearing the earth's heartbeat? What would it mean? You could feel the land breathing. What is he saying to Esperanza? To me, I believe that he's trying to make her understand that they are one with the land. The land is basically their friend. It's a living, breathing entity all of its own. It provides them with the grapes. The land has made them rich in their country. They own that vineyard. And if Esperanza lays there and listens enough, she can feel the aliveness of the land, just like it were a person. I think that's what he's telling her. She waited and lay silent, watching Papa's eyes, and then she felt it, softly at first, a gentle thumping, then stronger, a resounding thud, thud, thud against her body. She could hear it too, the beat rushing in her ears, shoomp, shoomp, shoomp. She stared at Papa, not wanting to say a word. not wanting to lose the sound, not wanting to forget the feel of the heart of the valley. She pressed closer to the ground until her body was breathing with the earth and with Papa's, the three hearts beating together. Why is that an important visual? The three hearts, Papa, Esperanza, and the land. Why is it an important visual to think about the three of their hearts beating together? Maybe because they're all connected. It's almost as if they share the same heart. Papa, his daughter Esperanza, and the land that has created everything that they have. It's helped them to be rich. It's provided them with a living and a home. So it's important to think about the three of them sitting there with their heartbeats beating together. She smiled at Papa, not needing to talk, her eyes saying everything. And his smile answered hers, telling her that he knew she had felt it. All right, the first chapter, Las Uvas, which means grapes. You're going to notice that each chapter in this book is named after a fruit. And be thinking about that. Why do you think the author did that? Why do you think she named each chapter after a fruit? 6 years later, so Esperanza was 6 in the beginning, so now she is 12. Papa handed Esperanza the knife. The short blade was curved like a scythe, its fat wooden handle fitting snugly in her palm. This job was usually reserved for the eldest son of a wealthy rancher, but since Esperanza was an only child and Papa's pride and glory, she was always given the honor. Last night she had watched Papa sharpen the knife back and forth across a stone, so she knew the tool was edged like a razor. Cuidate los dedos, said Papa. Watch your fingers. The August sun promised a dry afternoon in Aguas Calientes, Mexico. Everyone who lived and worked on El Rancho de las Rosas was gathered at the edge of the field. Esperanza's family, the house servants in their long white aprons, the vaqueros already sitting on their horses ready to ride out to the cattle, and 50 or 60 campesinos, straw hats in hand, holding their own knives ready. They were covered top to bottom in long-sleeved shirts, baggy pants tied at the ankles with string, and bandanas wrapped around their foreheads and necks to protect them from the sun, dust, and spiders. Esperanza, on the other hand, wore a light silk dress that stopped above her summer boots, and no hat. On top of her head, a wide satin ribbon was tied in a big bow, the tails trailing in her long black hair. The clusters were heavy on the vine and ready to deliver. Esperanza's parents, Ramona and Sixto Ortega, stood nearby. Mama, tall and elegant, her hair in the usual braided wreath that crowned her head. And Papa, barely taller than Mama, his graying mustache twisted up at the sides. He swept his hand toward the grapevines, signaling Esperanza. When she walked toward the arbors and glanced back at her parents, they both smiled and nodded, encouraging her forward. When she reached the vines, she separated the leaves and carefully grasped a thick stem. She put the knife to it, and with a quick swipe, the heavy cluster of grapes dropped into her waiting hand. Esperanza walked back to Papa and handed him the fruit. Papa kissed it and held it up for all to see. La cosecha, said Papa. Harvest. Ole, ole. A cheer echoed around them. The campesinos, the field workers, spread out over the land and began the task of reaping the fields. Esperanza stood between Mama and Papa with her arms linked to theirs and admired the activity of the workers. Papi, this is my favorite time of year, she said, watching the brightly colored shirts of the workers slowly moving among the arbors. Wagons rattled back and forth from the fields to the big barns, where the grapes would be stored until they went to the winery. Is the reason because when picking is done, it will be someone's birthday and time for a big fiesta? Papa asked. Esperanza smiled. When the grapes delivered their harvest, she always turned another year. This year, she would be 13. The picking would take 3 weeks, and then, like every other year, Mama and Papa would host a fiesta for the harvest and for her birthday. Marisol Rodriguez, her best friend, would come with her family to celebrate. Her father was a fruit rancher, and they lived on the neighboring property. Even though their houses were acres apart, they met every Saturday beneath the home oak on a rise between the two ranches. Her other friends, Chita and Bertina, would be at the party too, but they lived farther away, and Esperanza didn't see them as often. Their classes at St. Francis didn't start again until after the harvest, and she couldn't wait to see them. When they were all together, they talked about one thing: their quinceañeras, the presentation parties they would have when they turned 15. So a quinceañera is sort of like Sweet 16 in the United States, except it's for 15-year-old girls in Hispanic culture. And some of our Hispanic families here in the United States and here in Mount Sterling celebrate that big party, that big fiesta. And people spend a lot of money making sure it's a huge, extravagant event. Sometimes thousands of dollars they spend to create their daughter this big fiesta for her quinceañeras. There's a proverb or a saying that Hispanic families use, and it says, "Escar la casa por la ventana." And that means that when you're preparing for your girl's 15th birthday, you throw the house out the window. And basically that old saying means you're spending money that you don't really have, but it is so important that you're going to spend it anyway because you have to celebrate this great event in your daughter's life. Okay. They still had 2 more years to wait, but so much to discuss. The beautiful white gowns they would wear, the big celebrations where they would be presented, and the sons of the richest families would dance with them. After their quinceañeras, they would become old enough to be courted, marry, and become las patronas, the head of their households, rising to the positions of their mothers before them. Esperanza preferred to think, though, that she and her someday husband would live with Mama and Papa forever, because she couldn't imagine living anywhere other than El Rancho de las Rosas, or with any fewer servants, or without being surrounded by the people who adored her. It had taken every day of 3 weeks to put the harvest to bed, and now everyone anticipated the celebration. Esperanza remembered Mama's instructions as she gathered roses from Papa's garden. Tomorrow, bouquets of roses and baskets of grapes on every table. Papa had promised to meet her in the garden, and he never disappointed her. She bent over to pick a red bloom, fully opened, and pricked her finger on a vicious thorn. Big pearls of blood pulsed from the tip of her thumb, and she automatically thought, "Bad luck." She quickly wrapped her hand in the corner of her apron and dismissed the premonition. So a premonition is when you think that you have done something that's sort of predicting the future. And in their culture, a thorn pricking your finger was considered to be bad luck. Something bad was going to happen. Around this area, people sometimes say if a black cat crosses in front of you, you're going to have bad luck. That's another example of a premonition. All cultures have different premonitions of what they think will cause bad luck. For them, it was a thorn prick on a finger. Then she cautiously clipped the blown rose that had wounded her. Looking toward the horizon, she saw the last of the sun disappear behind the Sierra Madre. Darkness would settle quickly, and a feeling of uneasiness and worry nagged at her. Where was Papa? He had left early that morning with the vaqueros to work the cattle, and he was always home before sundown, dusty from the mesquite grasslands and stamping his feet on the patio to get rid of the crusty dirt on his boots. Sometimes he even brought beef jerky that the cattlemen had made. But Esperanza always had to find it first, searching his shirt pockets while he hugged her. Tomorrow was her birthday, and she knew that she would be serenaded at sunrise. Papa and the men who lived on the ranch would congregate below her window, their rich, sweet voices singing Las Mañanitas, the birthday song. She would run to her window and wave kisses to Papa and the others. Then, downstairs, she would open her gifts. She knew there would be a porcelain doll from Papa. He had given her one every year since she was born. And Mama would give her something she had made, linens, camisoles, or blouses embroidered with beautiful needlework. The linens always went into the trunk at the end of her bed for algún día, for someday. Esperanza's thumb would not stop bleeding. She picked up the basket of roses and hurried from the garden, stopping on the patio to rinse her hand in the stone fountain. As the water soothed her, she looked through the massive wooden gates that opened onto thousands of acres of Papa's land. Esperanza strained her eyes to see a dust cloud that meant riders were near and that Papa was finally home. But she saw nothing. In the dusky light, she walked around the courtyard to the back of the large adobe and wood house. There she found Mama searching the horizon too. "Mama, my finger. An angry thorn stabbed me," said Esperanza. "Bad luck," said Mama, confirming the superstition, but she half smiled. They both knew that bad luck could mean nothing more than dropping a pan of water or breaking an egg. Mama put her arms around Esperanza's waist, and both sets of eyes swept over the corrals, stables, and servants' quarters that sprawled in the distance. Esperanza was almost as tall as Mama, and everyone said she would someday look just like her beautiful mother. Sometimes when Esperanza twisted her hair on top of her head and looked in the mirror, she could see that it was almost true. There was the same black hair, wavy and thick, same dark lashes and fair, creamy skin. But it wasn't precisely Mama's face, because Papa's eyes were there too, shaped like fat brown almonds. "He is just a little late," said Mama, and part of Esperanza's mind believed her, but the other part scolded him. "Mama, the neighbors warned him just last night about bandits." Mama nodded and bit the corner of her lip in worry. They both knew that even though it was 1930 and the revolution in Mexico had been over for 10 years, there was still resentment against the large landowners. "Change has not come fast enough, Esperanza. The wealthy still own most of the land, while some of the poor have not even a garden plot. There are cattle grazing on the big ranches, yet some peasants are forced to eat cats. Papa is sympathetic and has given land to many of his workers. The people know that." "But Mama, do the bandits know that?" "I hope so," said Mama quietly. "I have already sent Alfonso and Miguel to look for him. Let's wait inside." Okay, we're going to stop there. The reason that Mama and Esperanza are worried about bandits is this is right after the revolution that happened in Mexico. And the president of Mexico at that time had laws that really helped the wealthy landowners while making the poor people become even poorer. So after the revolution was over, the poor people were still very angry with the wealthy landowners because those landowners had wanted that president to stay in office because he was making them richer and richer. Papa wasn't like that. Papa gave land to the poor. But the bandits, the people who were going and punishing the rich for supporting that president who was hurting the poor, they didn't know that Papa was one of the good guys and that he was helping. And so Mama and Esperanza are worried that they may have done something to hurt him. Okay, today was a little longer than most days are going to be because I had the introduction, but your challenge for today is to think of a proverb from your family, a saying that gives us advice. An example is, don't throw stones in glass houses. So think about what that proverb means, and then also think about another proverb that you've heard somebody in your family or your friends say. Hope you've enjoyed the first chapter. Bye-bye.